The rain fell in gentle sheets that afternoon, making the city glisten under gray skies. It was a quiet Thursday in early fall, the kind where time seemed to move slower, as if the world itself needed a moment to breathe. On the corner of Maple and 7th, pedestrians rushed past, heads down, umbrellas up, eyes glued to their phones, too busy, too absorbed, too indifferent, but not Emily. She stood at the edge of the crosswalk, her canvas tote heavy with groceries and the scent of fresh bread seeping through the cloth. She noticed him immediately, an older man in a long wool coat, soaked despite the umbrella trembling in his frail hand. He wasn't moving. He simply stood there, staring at the blinking orange hand on the streetlight, as if uncertain what it meant. Something about his presence didn't match the noise of the city. He seemed misplaced. His suit, while damp, was clearly expensive. His shoes, polished but worn, suggested long walks rather than boardrooms. And his eyes, though tired, held something deeper, the weight of stories untold. Emily approached, her voice gentle. "Do you need help crossing?" The man looked up, startled as if no one had spoken to him in days. Then he smiled. "Yes, I think I do." She offered her arm without hesitation, steadying him as they stepped off the curb together. Traffic paused, horns quieted. For a moment, it was just the two of them, walking through the rain, two strangers bound by a single act of kindness. He said nothing more, and she didn't ask. But as they reached the other side, he turned to her. "You remind me of someone," he said. "Someone I've been looking for a long time." Emily smiled, unsure how to respond. But deep inside, something told her this wasn't the end of a small encounter. It was the beginning of a story that would change everything. Emily watched as the man adjusted his coat, the rain now just a mist, clinging to the city like breath on glass. He seemed disoriented, not in a lost or senile way, but like someone who had returned to a place after a long exile and found it unfamiliar. She offered him a tissue from her tote, and he took it with quiet gratitude, dabbing the corners of his eyes more from emotion than from rain. "I'm Emily," she said, gently. "Do you want to sit somewhere? There's a cafe just down the block." He nodded slowly. "Yes, thank you. I could use something warm." As they walked together, she noticed how he carried himself, like someone used to command, to authority, yet humbled. Something about him sparked curiosity in her, a tension between presence and fragility. Not just a man who'd aged, but a man who had waited, endured. At the cafe, they settled into a corner booth. The server brought tea for him, black coffee for her. They sat in silence for a while. Then he spoke. "My name is Leonard," he said softly. "Leonard Westwood." Emily blinked. The name tickled something in her memory. She'd heard it before in a newspaper headline. Maybe a business article. An old scandal. She couldn't place it, but she knew it wasn't just a name. "I used to build things," Leonard continued, staring into the steam rising from his tea. "Companies, mostly. Real estate, tech. Nothing important now. Not since she disappeared." "Disappeared?" Emily asked, leaning forward. "My wife," he said, voice catching. "Isabel, gone without a trace. 20 years. No note, no body. Just gone." The words hit Emily like a shiver. The cafe around them blurred. Something wasn't right. Billionaires didn't just walk the streets alone, looking for people. And yet here he was, across from her, sipping tea and staring into a past that had never left him. "I think I see her sometimes," he whispered, "in crowds, on trains. And today, I thought maybe..." His eyes searched Emily's face with a desperate hope. "You might know something." Emily froze. She didn't, but something in her chest stirred. Not recognition, but connection. As if fate had just turned a key in a lock she hadn't known was there. The cafe hummed with the soft clinking of spoons against ceramic, the gentle murmur of quiet conversations, and the occasional hiss from the espresso machine behind the counter. But at their table, time felt suspended. Emily's fingers rested loosely around her coffee cup, growing cold, while Leonard's hand trembled slightly as he reached into the inside pocket of his coat. "I carry it with me everywhere," he said, voice low. "Not that it helps anymore. The picture's faded, but I still know her face like I know my own." He placed a small photograph on the table between them. The edges were frayed, curled from years of being pulled out and tucked back in. Emily leaned in. The woman in the photo was striking, not in the way that turns heads, but in the way that makes people remember. Deep, intelligent eyes, a subtle knowing smile. She wore a white dress and stood beside a vintage piano, one hand resting gently on the keys. This was taken 6 months before she vanished, Leonard said. She played every morning. Said it helped her remember who she was. Emily stared at the photo, feeling a strange ache. The woman looked familiar. Not like someone she had met, but like someone she could have known in another life. A woman with secrets, sorrow, and a story carved into every glance. She looks calm, Emily said, choosing her words carefully, but also like she's hiding something. Leonard nodded slowly. She was always quiet, brilliant but guarded. I loved her deeply, but there were things she never told me. And then one day, she was just gone. No signs of struggle, no financial activity. She didn't take a thing. Just vanished. Emily looked up. And you think she's still alive? Leonard met her eyes. I have to believe that. Otherwise, I lose myself. Emily leaned back in her seat, her heart beating faster. Part of her wanted to say this was beyond her, that she wasn't the right person to help. But another part, deep inside, whispered that there was a reason they had met that day in the rain. Something was unfolding. Will you help me? Leonard asked. Emily hesitated for only a moment. Yes, she said, but we start with everything you haven't told anyone else. Leonard stirred his tea slowly, as if the motion would help him gather thoughts that had scattered over 2 decades. Outside the cafe window, the rain had stopped. People passed by, unaware of the 2 strangers inside, beginning to pull threads from the fabric of a mystery that had gone cold. I never told the police everything, he said finally. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I knew what it would sound like. Emily leaned in, focused. Tell me anyway. Leonard's eyes flickered with hesitation, then settled into a quiet resolve. 2 weeks before Isabel vanished, she started acting different. She would wake up in the middle of the night and write in this old leather journal. Not poetry, not dreams, names, coordinates, numbers, some in languages I couldn't understand. I asked her about it once, and she just smiled and said, "It's for when the time comes." Emily's eyes widened. Did you keep the journal? He shook his head. It disappeared the same night she did, but the piano bench. That's where I found the envelope. What envelope? Leonard took a slow breath. After she was gone, I searched everywhere. Days, nights, I went through drawers, closets, even the garden. Then one morning, I sat down at the piano, just to feel close to her. And when I opened the bench to look for sheet music, I found it, a sealed envelope, no name on it. Inside were 3 things, a photograph I'd never seen, a single house key, and a short note. He paused, voice cracking. The note said, "If you love me, don't follow. If you forgive me, find the red house in Coldwater Hills." Emily stared. Did you go? I tried, but Coldwater Hills doesn't exist. Not on any map, not in any state record. I hired private investigators, offered rewards, nothing. A silence settled between them. Emily stared at the photograph, a black and white image of Isabel standing next to a red-painted house in a foggy countryside. Her face was partially turned, as if she knew someone was watching. There's something in that picture, Emily murmured, lifting it carefully. Wait, that weather vane, it's shaped like a horse. Leonard looked up sharply. Yes, I've seen one like it, Emily said slowly. Outside the city, near the trails where my uncle used to take me hiking. The room seemed to grow colder. Leonard sat forward, the color returning to his face. Could it be Coldwater Hills? Emily didn't answer right away, but in that moment, something inside her shifted, a pull not just toward solving a mystery, but toward something deeper, something that felt like destiny knocking, quiet but insistent. I think we need to go see it for ourselves. The drive out of the city was quiet. Leonard sat in the passenger seat of Emily's old Honda, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. The urban skyline faded behind them, replaced by long stretches of open road flanked by tall pines and weathered fences. The sky had cleared, but the atmosphere between them remained heavy, a blend of anticipation and fear. like opening a door you aren't sure you want to walk through. Emily kept her eyes on the road, but her thoughts churned. She'd never imagined her Thursday would turn into this, helping a mysterious older man chase the ghost of a woman who vanished without explanation. And yet, nothing had ever felt more necessary. They turned off onto a gravel path near the outskirts of the forest preserve. Emily remembered the place from childhood: winding trails, abandoned farmhouses, the faint scent of moss and birch bark. But something about it felt different now, sharper, more alert, like the land itself was watching. "There," she said, pointing ahead. Leonard looked up. A house stood at the end of the path, small, red-painted, with peeling trim and ivy crawling up its stone chimney. It matched the one in the photo exactly, but that was impossible. Emily had passed this way many times and had never seen it before. They parked, got out, silence surrounded them, broken only by the soft creak of the trees in the breeze. Leonard approached the porch slowly, every step a mix of dread and longing. The house was clearly abandoned, yet untouched. No broken windows, no graffiti, the kind of place forgotten not by time, but by choice. Emily noticed the weather vane on the roof, a horse, just like in the photo. "This is it," she whispered. Leonard reached the door and took out the old key from the envelope. He held it for a long moment, then slid it into the lock. It turned with a click, smooth, as if it had been used yesterday. They stepped inside. The interior smelled of old wood and silence. Dust danced in the shafts of light streaming through the windows. Furniture covered with white sheets. A piano in the corner, keys yellowed by time. But there was something else. A sound. A faint melody. Distant but unmistakable. Emily froze. "Do you hear that?" Leonard nodded, eyes wide. It was the same tune from the photo, a slow, haunting piece Isabel used to play every morning. But there was no one at the piano. They followed the sound down the narrow hallway, past a cracked mirror and a stack of yellowing newspapers. Then they reached the door at the end. Behind it, the music stopped. Leonard raised his hand to knock, but before he could, the door creaked open by itself. Emily held her breath. Inside, a single candle burned on a table, next to another photo of Isabel, and this time she was older. The air in the room was thick, almost sacred. Emily stepped in first, her heart pounding. Leonard followed, his eyes immediately locking onto the framed photograph on the table. He picked it up with trembling fingers. It was her, but older. Isabel's face had aged gracefully. Lines traced her cheeks and forehead like soft calligraphy, not from sorrow, but from years lived out of sight. Her hair, now silver, was pulled back in the same gentle twist she always wore. And her eyes, they still held the same quiet storm of secrets. "She was here," Leonard whispered, as if afraid the walls might answer. Emily glanced around. The small room was lived in, not recently, but not long ago either. Dust lay in delicate sheets across a few surfaces, but the candle was fresh, the wax still warm. A blanket on the armchair bore the faint imprint of a body, as if someone had just stood up. "Someone's been here," she said, stating the obvious. Leonard looked stunned. "I never gave up, but I never truly believed I'd be this close." On the desk, beside the photograph, lay a worn, leather-bound journal. Emily opened it slowly. Inside were pages of flowing script in English, French, and occasionally a language neither of them recognized. Diagrams, notes, maps. But one thing was clear. It was Isabel's handwriting. She was preparing for something, Emily said. "This looks like research. Maybe even a mission." Leonard flipped to the final page. A message was scrawled hastily, in dark ink. "He's close. I have to move again. If you found this, know that I'm safe, but not finished. The truth is bigger than us." Beneath it was a symbol, a simple circle divided by 3 lines, intersecting at the center. Emily traced it with her finger. "I've seen this before. On the trailhead near Raven's Bluff." Leonard turned toward her, the pieces finally taking shape. "You think that's her next stop?" "I think she left it for someone to find. Maybe you have. Maybe anyone who still believed." Leonard set the photo down gently. "Then we follow her." Emily nodded. They left the house as the wind picked up, leaves scattering across the porch like whispers. In the distance, a storm began to gather again. Not of rain, but of something deeper, something inevitable. And neither of them could have imagined what waited in Raven's Bluff. Raven's Bluff sat at the edge of the forest, like a secret the earth had half swallowed, wild, quiet, and untouched by time. Emily hadn't been there in over a decade, not since she was a teenager. But as she and Leonard pulled up to the overgrown trailhead, something about the place felt changed, not just aged, charged, as if someone had stirred the air. They stepped out of the car in silence. The woods around them were alive with rustling leaves and distant birdsong. A faint chill crept in under their jackets as they stood at the start of the path, eyes scanning for the symbol they had seen in Isabel's journal. There, Leonard pointed, carved into the wooden post at the entrance of the trail, just above an old ranger sign, was the circle with 3 lines. Emily exhaled. She was here. They started walking, following the winding path through the trees. The trail was uneven, strewn with roots and damp patches of moss. The light dimmed as the forest thickened, but Leonard kept pace, moving with a determination Emily hadn't yet seen in him. "Tell me more about her," Emily said, her voice quiet. Leonard glanced over. She was brilliant, curious, always chasing patterns in music, in history, in people. She used to say that everything is connected, that life leaves echoes if you know how to listen. She sounds like someone who didn't just vanish, she evolved. He smiled faintly. Yes, that's exactly the word, evolved. After nearly an hour of walking, the trail forked. One path led deeper into the forest. The other seemed to end in a clearing near a rocky ridge. Emily squinted. "There's something on the rocks," she said, heading toward the ridge. As they reached it, they saw it clearly, a large flat stone with something carved on its underside. Emily knelt and brushed away dirt and leaves, revealing more of the same symbol, but this time, surrounding a detailed sketch of a valley, a river, and what looked like coordinates. "A map," Leonard breathed. She left a map. Beside the carving, etched in faint but unmistakable lettering, were the words, "The place where we began, where truth was born, and silence fell." Emily looked at Leonard. "Does that mean anything to you?" He was pale. "Yes, it was the name of our estate before I sold it. Truthful. That's what Isabel called it, but no one else ever knew. It was never in any record." Emily stared at him. "Then this is personal. She's leading only you. And now you," he added softly. For a moment, the forest was utterly still. Then Emily rose. "Let's find Truthful." And just like that, the trail behind them disappeared, as if the forest had closed its mouth, protecting the secret it had just whispered. The drive to what had once been known as Truthful took them hours. Leonard hadn't returned in over 15 years, not since he sold the estate after Isabel disappeared. He couldn't bear the empty halls, the piano, the ghost of her scent in the fabrics. But now, as they approached the iron gate at the end of a tree-lined road, something felt eerily preserved. The gate stood open. No locks, no chains. Just a plaque, once tarnished, now clean, as if someone had polished it recently. Truthful. Emily stepped out first, gravel crunching under her boots. She looked to Leonard, who stared at the open gate like it was a doorway into another lifetime. "You're sure no one's lived here?" Leonard nodded. "Not since I left. It's been abandoned." But it didn't look abandoned. Bushes were trimmed, windows intact, curtains drawn. "Someone's been taking care of it," Emily said. Leonard whispered, "Or she never left." The front door creaked open at the slightest touch. Emily stepped inside first, the scent of cedar and dust greeting her like a memory. Leonard followed, each step heavier than the last. The house was dim, but not cold, not lifeless. It was waiting. They moved down the hallway, passing portraits that hadn't been there before. Charcoal sketches of a woman in different poses. Isabel. Every drawing showed her at a piano, or gazing out a window, always alone. Leonard stopped at the final door. His fingers hesitated on the brass knob. "I used to find her here in the mornings," he said softly. "This was her sanctuary." He pushed the door open. The piano stood exactly as he remembered, gleaming, untouched. A single sheet of music lay open, handwritten, signed, "To the one who never stopped listening, I still hear you." Emily stepped closer. A cassette tape sat on the bench. labeled Play Me. Leonard stared at the cassette as if it might vanish. Emily picked it up gently, inspecting the label. The handwriting matched the journal. It was Isabel's, no doubt. They found an old stereo tucked beneath the shelves, dusty but intact. Emily wiped off the buttons and slid the tape into the deck. With a soft click and a faint whir, the machine came alive. For a moment there was only static. Then a voice. "Leonard, if you found this, it means you didn't stop. You never did." Leonard closed his eyes. "I'm sorry I left. I had to. I can't explain everything, not yet. But I promise." The silence wasn't rejection. It was protection. Emily stood frozen. "They're watching. Listening. That's why I disappeared. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I loved you too much to let them find you." The tape hissed again. A long pause. "If you're at truthful, then you're close. But the truth is deeper than this house. Go to the lighthouse. You'll understand." The message ended in a crackle. Leonard looked at Emily. "The lighthouse," she nodded. There's only one she could mean. The coastline stretched out in silence as Emily's car hugged the cliffside road. The ocean below shimmered under the overcast sky, crashing against jagged rocks in a rhythm older than memory. Leonard sat in quiet thought, his hand resting over the tape in his coat pocket like a lifeline. "There used to be a lighthouse near here," he said finally. "Old, decommissioned. Isabel loved it. We went there once before she started having nightmares." Emily frowned. "Nightmares?" He nodded. "She'd wake up whispering numbers, coordinates, warnings." That was when the journal started. As they rounded the next bend, a silhouette emerged through the mist, tall, narrow, and weather-worn. The lighthouse. But there was something strange. It wasn't marked on the GPS. No signs. No path. Just a gravel turnoff, half covered in seaweed and sand. They pulled in. As they approached the door, Emily noticed fresh footprints in the wet earth. Someone had been here recently. Leonard reached for the handle, but the door was already open. Inside, the air was salt-heavy and still, and halfway up the winding stairs, a light was on. Each step up the spiral staircase echoed with tension. The stone walls of the lighthouse felt closer than they should have, pressing in with every turn. Leonard climbed slowly, his hand trailing the cold, rusted rail. Emily followed just behind, heart racing. Halfway up she whispered, "What if it's not her?" Leonard didn't look back. "Then we face it together." The light above flickered. They reached the final landing. The door to the lantern room was slightly ajar, warm light seeping through the crack. Emily gently pushed it open, and there she was. Sitting in an old wooden chair, facing the ocean, was a woman with silver hair twisted neatly at the nape of her neck. Her posture was straight still, she didn't turn. Leonard stepped forward. "Isabel." The woman turned slowly, her face older, yes, but unmistakable. She smiled. "I was beginning to think you'd never come." Leonard froze. Words caught in his throat, his eyes flooded. "I never stopped looking," he said, barely above a whisper. Isabel rose to her feet. "And I never stopped waiting." Emily stepped back quietly, the air thick with something sacred. This wasn't a reunion, it was a homecoming. And yet, the look in Isabel's eyes held something more, a warning. The embrace was long, silent, and trembling. Leonard held Isabel as if the world might rip her away again. Emily stood by the narrow window, giving them space, though her eyes never left Isabel's face. There was warmth in her, yes, but something else too, a flicker of tension behind the smile. When they finally separated, Leonard stepped back, studying her. "You look whole," he said. "I had to be," Isabel replied. "For what's coming," Emily spoke for the first time. "What do you mean?" Isabel's gaze shifted to her, measured, searching. "I left because I uncovered something, Emily. Something that made me a target. They told me I had to disappear, that if I stayed with Leonard, he'd be pulled into it too." Leonard frowned. "Who's they?" Isabel didn't answer directly. Instead, she crossed the room to an old brass lantern bolted to the wall. With a precise motion, she twisted its base. A dull click echoed through the floor. A panel of wood beneath the stairwell slid open. Behind it, a narrow staircase descending into darkness. "Come," she said. "If you want the truth, you have to see it for yourself." Leonard hesitated. Emily didn't. They followed Isabel down the stairs, past stone walls lined with maps, clippings, and coded notes pinned under glass. At the bottom was a room lit only by a single hanging bulb. In the center, covered by cloth, stood a large black chest. Isabel looked at Leonard. "Everything I discovered, everything I risked, is inside this box." She placed a hand on the lid. "But once I open it, nothing in your life will ever be the same." The room was silent, except for the hum of the single bulb swinging gently overhead. Shadows shifted on the stone walls as if holding their breath. Leonard stepped closer to the black chest, his hand brushing lightly over the lid. The wood was smooth, old, but reinforced with metal bands, the kind used to protect something not just valuable, but dangerous. Emily watched from behind, her instincts prickling. Isabel met Leonard's gaze. "Before I show you, you have to understand. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you. I left because I found something the world wasn't ready for." Leonard's voice was steady. "And now," Isabel nodded. "Now the world is waking up, and they'll come looking for me again." She unlatched the chest with 2 clicks, slowly lifted the lid. Inside were documents, folders, a worn passport, Polaroids, diagrams of classified equipment, newspaper clippings with headlines redacted in thick black ink. But beneath it all, wrapped in velvet, was a device unlike anything Emily had ever seen. A sphere, metallic and humming softly, with symbols etched across its surface in patterns that didn't belong to any language they knew. Leonard looked stunned. "What is this?" Isabel's voice dropped. "Something that was buried, then stolen, then hidden." Emily stepped forward. "It's not human, is it?" Isabel shook her head slowly. "It's not, entirely." The light above flickered, then a sound footsteps on the stairs above. Emily turned sharply. "Someone's here." Isabel slammed the chest shut. "They found us." The footsteps above were slow, heavy, deliberate. Isabel locked the chest in one fluid motion and slid it beneath a hollow compartment in the floor, covering it with a dusty rug. Just as the door at the top of the stairs creaked open, Emily killed the light. They were swallowed by darkness. Leonard's breath was shallow. Emily's hand brushed against the wall, feeling for anything to defend them if it came to that. Then a voice echoed down the stairwell. "Cold.com, Isabel. It's over. Come with us quietly." Emily's blood froze. Leonard took a step forward, but Isabel grabbed his wrist. "No," she whispered. "They don't want me, they want the device." Another voice joined the first, younger, more impatient. "Search the place now." Flashlight beams cut through the cracks in the wood above, sweeping the walls like hunting dogs. Isabel turned to Emily. "There's a tunnel behind that cabinet." Emily didn't wait. She and Leonard pushed it aside, revealing a narrow crawl space carved into the cliff rock. "Where does it lead?" Leonard asked. "To the sea." They crawled through the darkness, hands scraping against stone, hearts racing. Behind them, the sound of splintering wood. The invaders had found the stairwell. Then, gunshots. 2. Muffled, not aimed at them, warning shots, or intimidation. They didn't stop to ask. The tunnel opened at the base of the cliff, where moonlight broke through the mist. The sea roared below, and a small boat bobbed against the rocks, tied and ready. Leonard turned to Isabel. "You knew we might need to run." She smiled sadly. "I've been preparing for 20 years. They climbed in. As the boat pulled away into the dark waters, the lighthouse stood silhouetted behind them, its lantern flickering one last time, then going dark. Emily looked back at Isabel, whose eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "What now?" Emily asked. Isabel didn't blink. "We don't run. We reveal the truth." Leonard reached for her hand. Together, and for the first time in 2 decades, Isabel let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, the truth could set them all free.